classes from 9 to 12. Some kids arrive a little earlier, they're picked up a little later. And then I have, then, you know, I'm also, and very often on Mondays, Ken comes, and he usually comes from 11:30 to 12:30. At times I make lunch for him. Very often he takes me out to lunch, and then we come home and he sits in the blue chair and we talk and I draw him. And so, you know, there's a lot going on. And more recently he has not been coming every week, but he'll call me, you know, and now he's out in California.
Visiting his kids?
They're celebrating his 75th birthday.
Mm-hmm.
But Judy didn't go because she just had her first grandchild.
Mm-hmm.
And she was about to have it, and she was going to be there at the birthing. It's the first grandchild.
She has one daughter, as I remember it.
And so it goes. And then I walk. I walk up as frequently as I can to visit the Morses. That's a very good walk.
Yeah,
It's up
very
the
well.
hill, yeah, and then down the hill is just as good as up the hill. I just called there, the Morses, and Sonny is doing.
There are lots of things you told us, but sometimes when I sort of roam in memory through all of your life, there are certain stories that stand out. And I always think, gee, I would love to have a little thread just linking the stories, just following some of the different lines of experience in your life. I would love to be able to really not worry about remembering, but just being able to listen to you.
Obey is meal.
Obey is meal. That's right. So I thought we could either begin sort of to some degree chronologically, just because I would like to be reminded sort of about that early crossing of the sea in your life, right?
The crossing of the sea.
Yeah. So, but
where everybody was seasick.
Where everyone
and
was
my
seasick.
mother never came out from down below.
That's right.
And
That's
when my
right.
father took risks because the boat was going this way and that, and he was chased off the upper deck where there was nobody and nobody was supposed to be.
And
he talked to God.
Did he really?
He did.
How did he do that? What do you remember of the way he did that?
He put me on his shoulders, which was rather precipitous, you see. So sometimes I held on to his head.
Mm-hmm.
But it was, you're so distracting.
We're not going to be distracting. David's now going to just settle down.
Are you settled, David?
I'm settled.
Are you settled, Sharon? Are you settled, dear?
Absolutely, darling.
I'm not settled.
Okay, so your father, let's
yes.
settle. Well, this is going to be very kind of,
okay.
So he would talk to God, and I just want you to tell all of us what his talking to God looked like to you as a child. What was that like? I couldn't
see him because I was perched on his shoulders.
But you would hear him?
Precipitously. No, all I knew is that I often heard him talking to God. So I knew when he was talking to God.
And did he tell you that is what he was doing, or was that what you understood as a child?
Never. Even when he told me stories, I thought he was making them up, and what a wonderful storyteller he was. And it wasn't until way longer that I realized he was telling me Bible stories.
He was a man of faith.
My father was an Orthodox Jew who had an extraordinary voice that was recognized very early, and so that on holidays and even the Sabbath they would bring him from one shul to the other to sing. So my father was very much at home with all of the paraphernalia around here and up here. And
did he wear those on the boat crossing? So he would have looked to anyone like an Orthodox Jew at that time.
He would look to anyone today like an Orthodox Jew.
He went through his entire life with the trappings of
no,
Orthodoxy. No.
What interfered with my father's practices were the fact that after a while he couldn't get work because he was supposed to work on Saturday, but that was a long time later. But the earliest memories of my father was of when he put on the tallis and all of these things, he would let me go underneath. And for me it was a tent. And my father had a voice, I don't know, David, whether you remember, but he had a voice that when he sang as an adult, he had a very beautiful bass baritone. It would vibrate under the floor and come up into your body. And I've learned since that there are voices that carry that way. So I had a very early experience bonding with my father, which saved me.
Yeah, I've always imagined your father to be the most kindred spirit of your early life. Was that true of childhood, that he was the most
Yes,
kindred?
because as I was telling Sharon on our trip here, that my mother was beyond poverty, so poor. And I won't go into her whole life story, but she always aspired and acted and was really a lady. And the one thing in Russia and in Latvia, because my father and mother were both Latvian, only the peasants had big feet, and the aristocracy had small feet. And so I didn't know until much, much later why my father always took me everywhere with him and never my mother, until I realized it's because she couldn't walk, because she squeezed her feet into size 4 shoes. Now that was like the Chinese binding their feet. You're shaking your head.
Oh, how the thought
And
of
when
it.
she finally bought the first 2 shoes that fitted her, they were size 7. Now to go from a 4, yes. So I became my father's companion because he loved to hike, he loved to go to museums, he loved to go to the theater, and I did all these things. Yes, now you know my early beginnings. And when we came to, finally, in October, when the seas from the Baltic were, we went over the Baltic, that it was devastating. Nobody was on deck. And my mother had been sick the whole time. And we came to Ellis Island, and I remember vividly the cages that we were in, that were mesh cages, and nobody could understand my father because he spoke Latvian, he spoke Russian, a little Estonian, and Yiddish, and all of the people then in 1923, October in Ellis Island, were Irish. See, so
Do you mean the officials were Irish?
the people
Immigrants
who
or-
interviewed the immigrants,
Were earlier immigrants from Ireland?
when they immigrated, but they were civil service workers.
Okay. It's interesting.
So,
So that my earliest memories were that my mother was examined by a doctor
At Ellis Island.
at Ellis Island because she was coughing. And the doctor told her, he gave her something to suppress the cough because he felt that if she were at all sick, that we wouldn't be able to get it. So from the very beginning, there were several incidents that made it very iffy that we would come here.
do you remember being frightened?
No, to me it was all a theater. I didn't know what was going on, but I could see, but I remember this. This is what being a visual artist has given me, that whenever something like this is asked of me, I see pictures.
I remember you telling me that the boat you were on, coming from Russia, was the last boat.
It was not the last boat coming it was the last time that we could have gotten out being Jews from Latvia.
Because of the quotas?
The quotas, right. on top of the fact that nobody in my father's family, nobody, wanted us here because my father, as a youth, was a rascal. He today would have been called a juvenile delinquent because he would go to the market and steal fruit.
You mean none of your family who was already in the States
That's
wanted him
right.
to join them?
That's right. He was the only one not here. Many of them had been here for many years and owned houses and property. They felt that and his mother was sent for. Now, this was a typical family of those years where Orthodox man would have a wife and have children, and then the wife would die in childbirth. And so he would remarry and have more children. And it happened with my father's family that the father married 3 times. And his last wife was my father's mother. And they didn't send for her until way, way later, you know. And they wouldn't send for my father until, and the mother had all these stepchildren, and she never had a permanent place to live. She would live maybe 1 month at a time in one of the children's or stepchildren's houses. Excuse me. This is a wonderful drink. So, to get back to those early years, I never understood the relationship that my father's extended family, half-brothers, sisters, had to my mother, because I could see that they had little regard for her.
So no one sponsored you when you first...
Finally, his birth brother, an older brother, sponsored him, who was a property owner, and that was in Brooklyn, and they found a little hovel apartment for us, and I'll never forget that apartment because it was dark and it had a bathroom out in the hall, and it didn't have windows facing front, it had windows on it. It was like hell.
Mm-hmm. You must have really been so struck by sort of all the things you had to adjust to at once. There were so many.
You're asking whether I was struck by.
What was it like? Let me rephrase it. What was it like to come to a place where you didn't know the language, you didn't know many people, you had only your parents to guide you, and they were lost in a way themselves?
You know, my mother had nursed me until I was 3 years old, so that I was a very difficult child. I know that. I cried easily, I was frustrated easily, and could cry copiously. And I remember long years of crying copiously until my mother couldn't stand it and would say in Yiddish, "Du pischst schön weiter mit die Augen, you're peeing with your eyes again." And that would only make me cry more. And then I would stop crying, I had no tears left, and I would think to myself, that was a good cry. So I don't know what I was born with that brought me little adventures in every way. Also, from the earliest memories I have, I was scribbling, and all there was to scribble on were either the inner columns of my father's Yiddish newspaper, where the column was wide enough, or bags that occasionally came, or wrapped newspaper. And so that was my escape. So I had many things to escape too. Crying, drawing, observing, wondering what everything is about, because I didn't know what anything was about.
So that your mother nursed you till you were 3 was
Yeah.
was that because she had a very tender, nurturing side of herself?
I think that was my insistence, because even when my brother was born 4 years later, and she nursed him, I remember crying out to him, "Tsitske," to her, "Tsitske," which means tit, very rough word, "Tsitske," and she'd let me hold her breast.
But what I'm asking you is,
Yeah.
was there a tender and nurturing side to your mom?
There must have been, or I would have died.
Yeah.
No,
Because
I
you
mean,
always, my sense of your description of her is as of someone who was sort of always in a struggle with herself about something.
No, my mother was always in the struggle with me.
With you.
That's right, because I was very temperamental, because she didn't understand me, because she had had no nurture. Her mother died when she was 6, I think, and she became at a very early age. She had a brother and a younger sister, an older brother and younger sister. She became the housewife, and then at 11 she was sent to the mills to work. So my mother it was a miracle.
Yeah.
My mother was one of those miracles of survival. And then, what I learned much later, that made me understand my mother. It takes a long time to understand your parents and to even have compassion, was that my father was after her sexually from the time he knew her. He was not a birth relative, but an uncle through marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And he used to hide and wait for her to pass and grab her. And it wasn't until my brother died and I got some of his papers that I realized that she had been pregnant before marriage with an older brother who died on the way to the hospital. It was a big snow, and they were walking to the hospital, and she delivered in the snow, and he died, and that she wasn't even married to my father when I was conceived. So you can imagine Orthodox families. It took me a long time to understand why they never seemed to, they all held her in disdain. Not very auspicious beginning, but look what it brought about, a fighter.
Absolutely.
A life force.
So so you were 3 when you came over
Yeah.
to this country, and
I
then
was 3 on September 22nd, and that was October.
and so obviously you didn't go to school immediately.
Oh, hardly. There was no
Right.
school for 3 years.
I know. So
No, I didn't speak English, and I was called, when we finally moved from that hovel, because my father was very talented, and he was able to go from Latvia to Russia because he was an extraordinary upholsterer. And upholsterers like my father in those days knew how to do tufting and working with antiques and so forth. So that he got work. It was before the Depression, and we moved very quickly first into an apartment where my brother was born, which I remember distinctly. He was 4. And then we moved into a house that had 2 stories, and we had a sun porch, which became my sleeping porch. And his mother, who was still traveling from one child and stepchild to another, my grandmother, who was very orthodox and wore a sheitel, a wig, came to live with us for a month. And she would occupy the bed on the sun porch where I slept, and she was a heavy woman, and so the bed would tilt toward her, and so I used to hold on to the sides of the bed in order not to go there. But what scared me completely was that when I woke up, I would see her head on the table because she'd taken her wig off.
You didn't know she wore a wig?
No, I didn't. I was afraid to look at the head. And
So when did you realize it was her wig?
I don't know, but when we moved to this place, it was Atkins Avenue. And it was not paved. and all the kids played in the dirt in the street. And there was a synagogue opposite us, and my father was the star of the synagogue, you know. So I was able to go to the synagogue and visit the Orthodox Jews who, after services on the Sabbath, the women would prepare a feast for them, and my mother would always say to my father, "Vel nit shikya," don't get drunk, because all he needed was a little bit of vodka or whatever they were drinking, and he would do a kazatsky and lay flat on the ground. They'd have to pick him up. He was really something else. Oh,
His vitality and his joie de vivre were really charmed you always.
Well, you would have enjoyed him if you weren't upset by him. And David was old enough to have known him, but I don't think you remember him.
Only vague screen memories. Yeah.
Screen memories?
Screen, right.
Screen memories. So that on Atkins Avenue, I didn't understand the children, and they didn't understand me. And I was called a Maki, and a Maki meant, a Maki was the worst thing you could call an immigrant.
Mm-hmm.
A Maki. But not only do they call me a Maki, I was the king of the the king of the Makis, with the exception of one girl who was a little bit older than me, who was interested, and she, I don't know how, but everybody knew already that I was drawing, that I had talent. And I don't know how I was able to communicate to her that my problem was with drawing hair, because my mother was very curly haired, and that's another thing, that my mother was not accepted among the Jewish population because she had carrot red hair, very kinky, and she had on her right side, because that's where she had what is called a lapa. A lapa is a bear's claw. She had a birthmark which covered this part of her forehead that had fuzz on it and was colored. And so she used to pull her curly red hair over this. She must have been a phenomenon,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I mean, physically and her upbringing. And that she lived to be 72 or 74 was amazing.
Mm.
She outlived my father by many years.
When did you realize that you were an artist?
My earliest memories.
Uh-huh.
My earliest memories. And so this girl that I told you about brought me up to her house. She lived in an apartment. And she brought me into a bedroom where her mother had an enormous bureau drawer. And her mother wasn't there. She opened up the drawer, and there were drawings of girls. And I could see how hair was done, that there was a part. And, oh, what a liberation, you know. But my good fortune is, and it really continues to be, is that wherever I went from the earliest time, my talent was recognized. And that brought me support in every way. So to go back, what did you want to hear about the beginnings?
Your neighborhood where you lived that you're describing with the synagogue across the street, that was not a Jewish neighborhood? There were other ethnic groups?
There
living?
were, the way Brooklyn in that area, this was called already East New York, was organized is that there'd be a block where there'd be mostly Jewish people, but there also were some immigrants from Poland and then from other countries. And then on the surrounding blocks, Blake Avenue, there were even some blacks. It was a very mixed neighborhood.
So you hung out with everybody, or you hung out mostly with Jewish kids?
Well, the blocks that I were on were mostly Jewish kids, but my brother, who was 4 years younger, had a black friend who was one of his best friends, who lived on one adjoining. And I had friends who were Greek. And also, well, you know, I'm talking about Atkins Avenue. The place that we lived the longest was Logan Street, where I lived until I was married.
So when did you begin to learn English? Before you went to school?
Oh,
or-
no, when I,
So you have to tell the story about your first day at school.
okay. I'm
That's a
gonna
classic
cry.
Millie story.
No,
You're
I have-
allowed.
I have to blow my nose. Pardon me. Well, my mother walked me to school. And the schools in Brooklyn, it was PS 64, how could I ever forget, were so crowded. The teachers were Irish spinsters. There were two kids sitting together on a seat, you know. And
So how many kids in a class?
I didn't
Average
count.
class.
Well, I would imagine that there must have been 50 or more, you know. So the teachers were disciplinarians, and I learned that very quickly, because when anybody spoke out of turn or anything, there used to be what they called the dunce chair right next to the teacher's desk, and the kids would go to the dunce chair, and if they were very bad, they had to wear a dunce hat, you know. So when my mother came, she stayed there, and of course I started crying. And finally the teacher, she didn't understand English until much later. I really taught her English. That just as I began to understand gestures, she had to go. And she left. And I became then, it became like live theater. What's all this going on here? So much was going on. And there was a game that fascinated me that was taking place the whole time. Somebody would raise their hand and they would say something, and the teacher would nod, and in the back there was a blackboard that had niches in it, and there was a piece of wood, and the kid would take the piece of wood and disappear. And then they'd come back. And somebody else would do this, and this kept happening all the time. And I wondered, and I would have liked to play that game, but I didn't understand it. Then, as the morning wore on, I had to pee. And I said, that's what the game is. They're going to pee. And I didn't know what they were saying, but I raised my hand, and the teacher called on me. Never knowing my name or anything, he called on me. And I stood up and I said, "Ich muss gehen pissen." And the class exploded. And the teacher, I had to sit down, and I was so scared I forgot about pee. And I sat there. And then after a while, I remembered I had to pee, and I started rocking and squeezing my legs together as healthy. I'd taken bunkers, which means that helps as much as it would to cup a dead man.
Right.
I had to pee. So once again I raised my hand. Ich muss gehen pissen, and this time it was pandemonium. And the teacher made me sit on the dunce chair, and she made me put the dunce hat on, and I peed in my pants on the floor. And when my mother picked me up, I got a chvask and a chmaye. I have spoiled the reputation of the whole family. That was my beginning. Well, my dear, I was not put in kindergarten. I was put into the first grade, maybe because of the date of my birth, I don't know. And in those years, they didn't have the first year and the second year. You had 1A and 1B, and then 2A. You had half years. And I learned English so quickly that I never went to 1B. I went from 1A to 2A. And I went from 2A to 3A. And by the time I was ready for middle school, which I went to a rapid advanced school in Queens, I had to bus, I was 10 and a half. And I made the 7th and 8th grade. By the time I was 12, I entered high school. So, how do you call that for overcompensation?
All because you didn't know how to say, I need to go to the bathroom.
Oh, no, they never said anything. They would say, what I realized later, they would say, can I leave a room? And when I understood the words, why were they saying, can I leave a room? I thought they said, can I leave a room? You know, they were saying, can I leave the room? But the way English was spoken there, was slurred. And from time to time, when I hear myself, I can still hear the Brooklyn in my voice.
Yeah.
And certainly the gestures.
So did you wind up, because of how good you were at school, did you wind up liking school in general? Or were you just working very hard to keep moving through school?
Oh no, I adored school. I got so much recognition. And I got recognition in the earliest grades for being an artist, from the earliest grades. And fortunately, yes, in middle school, grades 7th and 8th, they had school arts scholarships for the best artist in the grade. So I was the best artist in the 7th and 8th grade, and I got a scholarship to go into Manhattan to the Rorick Museum, where Eric Pape was teaching us art, and I had to take the subway. I had 3 changes to get to Riverside Drive. Can you imagine letting a child do that these days?
This was how old?
Huh?
11, 12?
I was 12 and a half when I entered 9th grade, so I was a year younger. So, but many things were happening to me, because when we moved from Atkins Avenue, we moved to an apartment building in Montauk Avenue, and things got a little bit tougher. We got into a smaller apartment. And
Was there a reversal of fortune that led to that?
I think it was the beginning of the Depression.
Uh-huh.
And in that apartment, there was living, I think 2 floors below us, a dentist, Dr. Orbach. And it became known in the building that I was very talented, because I would frequently be outdoors and the kids would pose for me and I'd be drawing them. And I remember the kids saying, you know, gee, I wish I could. And I said, sure, and I was teaching them. You know, it's strange how far back things start. I wanted to just tell you, Dr. Orbach was astounded by my talent. And also, I was really very smart. And he had a nurse, and during the summer, when school was out, he would ask me when his nurse went to lunch whether I would do what she had to do, maybe cut the cottons and hand him the tools and sterilize them. And he didn't charge for my dental work. And in those days, everybody had caries because you didn't have fluoride, and, you know. And the dentist's office was filled with kids, and he only could devote maybe 10, 15 minutes to a kid. So you were at the dentist's office maybe 3 times a week, and people would do their homework there. But during the vacation, he let his nurse go on vacation. I became his nurse, and he taught me how to make gold inlays, you know, how to help make the impressions and all that. And it's amazing. Isn't it amazing? Dr.
You could have been a dentist.
Well, I could
Or a
have been
dental hygienist.
or what? Yes, I could have been so many things on the way.
So did your parents did you feel from them, what were their expectations of what your life would be or should be?
Who knows what they're...
They never
just wanted me to be a good girl, please. But my father recognized my talent. He did. And he took me to museums, you know. He really did. And I remember the first consciousness I had of a woman painter was Rosa Bonheur's big painting at the Met, which is there now. It used to be over a staircase, of the horses. And that a woman would do that enormous a painting with those beautiful horses. Because by this time also, I had become aware of artists and artists. And there used to be, well, this, I'm mixing up my stories and my dates.
So, Mom, when you were a senior, when you were to be graduated from high school, what was the plan?
Well, my father did upholstery when I was supposed to, before I graduated from high school. First place, there has to be luck always, and I always had luck. The high school principal was a known poet, Elias Lieberman. And I had always written poetry. My father had written poetry all his life, too. And as a matter of fact, I have a medal that I got before I was age 9 in elementary school. I got not the gold medal when there was a 6th grader who got the gold medal. But I was age 9, I forget which grade that was. Then I got the silver medal for writing a poem about Mother's Day. Do you want to hear the poem? Do you know what events on Sunday? Well, I'll tell you, it's Mother's Day. And I want you all to work very hard to buy your mother at least a card. We must honor our mother, so we could honor our mother on Mother's Day. So I got the silver medal when I was not quite 9.
Your mother must have been beside
No,
herself.
now listen to this. I come running home. Mama, Mama! My mother comes to the window. Mama, I got the silver medal! And I run upstairs and I never want you to hear you praising yourself. Let other people praise you. It's not nice to praise yourself. You're looking with astonishment.
I know the story.
You know the story. Aren't you still astonished what I have surmounted? Well, why do you think I'm sitting here after a quintuple bypass, after a herniated navel, after a broken coccyx, after... Now you know, you're all smiling and laughing, but I have learned, and you know it, from the earliest beginning. I do not take myself seriously. I have seen and gone through too much, and so I can laugh at myself, but I know how to make people laugh. Look, you're all smiling, laughing.
So, Mom, what happened as it got time to graduate high school?
Okay. By that time, first of all, the biggest luck for me when I was 12 and a half and entered high school, I was so ignorant, is that there was a girl there who was an immigrant from Estonia. Her name was Abby Stark. And she came from a very educated and cultured family. College graduates, people who were in choruses and all kinds of things. And she, being an immigrant herself, kind of recognized that I was something special. And she invited me home. And they lived about a mile from me. And they became my real family. And because I would walk there every time I had time. And they took me to my first choral recitals because several of them were in choruses. They took me to see Tobacco Road.
Mm-hmm.
My father used to take me to Yiddish theater, but they took me to see Tobacco Road, imagine. And they treated me as if I was very special. But I was. And my father became very curious. Why am I always going there? And he wanted to check. And he went over to the Starks, and he fell in love with the whole family. But he and Abby's mother really became very close. And so he felt very secure and didn't bother. And I spent really more time there, and they became my substitute family. And when I began to become a little older, and I was at one point quite obese as a child because of the kind of food, you know, all the chicken fat and everything, but also my mother would,
Just one sec.
Here you go.
Okay.
well, Sharon, you're going to have to teach me how to use that.
It's easy.
No, well, if it's that easy, I want to learn to use it.
So you were getting to the end of high school.
In high school, I became a favorite of the art teachers, and I still remember the head of the department, Mr. Green, and then a Mr. Casey. But the woman who had the most influence on me, I suddenly forgot her name. And I've been trying in my hypnagogic moment I can see her, because she went to the Art Students League.
This was Thomas Jefferson High School, right?
That's right. That's right. She went to the Art Students League, and she thought that I would be interested in seeing the class, and she went to Robert Brackman's class. And I came up there, and it was a very, very crowded class with all these adults at the easels, and this beautiful aroma, this scent of turpentine. Oh, my dears, that I am here now, you may as well hear it on tape, is the result of all of the forbidden things that I have inhaled, all of the acids from printmaking, my father's benzene and benzol and turpentine suffusion, you name it, I have breathed it. Breathed it is, I have breathed it. I'm forgetting past tense. So,
That resilience has many layers.
right. Now, in the high school, because I always loved poetry, I started a poetry reading group. And Elias Lieberman, the principal, liked that. And I asked him, because he had friends who were then-known poets, whether he would invite poets to come to read to us, and we would read our poetry to them.
Wonderful.
And this is what happened, and I remember a poet by the name of Prembor coming and others, and they were astonished. They would read to us, and then we would read to them. And also, I asked Mr. Green whether I could start an oil painting club. And he said, sure. Not only that, he gave me the keys to the supply closet. So I still have some pen points because I stole a little box full. Do you know those pen points? If I am not taken in for all the other bad things I've done, it'll be for stealing from high school.
Now, the portrait that we have in the living room of the old man, is that from high school?
You're one of your first paintings.
No, that's the Art Students League with Robert Brackman.
Which was when?
That was 1936.
So you graduated from high school and went to Art Students League?
Now that's another story. Let's back up, because this is an important story. I think it was either in middle school, probably in high school, the rodeo came to town, and the World Telegram had a contest. They would allow the best artist to come and do drawings at the rodeo, and the best drawing every day would be printed in the World Telegram. Okay? So I was sitting there, and what did I draw among other things? I drew a cowboy's face, because I had always been interested in faces. It was the only face that was drawn, and it appeared in the World Telegrams, with saying who I was and what high school I went to. I'm putting you to sleep.
No.
And my father had that piece of paper, the World Telegram, in his wallet, that he showed at every possible opportunity. And because he was working for interior decorators, he would often go to the homes of the people where he would upholster something in their home. And he came to the home of a man who taught at Pratt Institute. And he took this drawing out And the man was very interested. And he told me to come and visit him and bring other drawings. And I did. And he said, I promise you, I'm going to get you a scholarship to Pratt Institute when you graduate from high school. And I was so excited. And by that time, I had also organized a club where the people I had known in high school would come. We rented a basement of a private house, and this was during the WPA period. And I'll tell you why I say this. So we would meet at this club, and one of my younger friends from high school, Jack Frankenstein, brought down a Victrola, and he had classic records. And we had a wonderful time. I don't remember how much I collected from each person in order to pay the rent. It wasn't very much. And we had mostly boys and a couple of girls. And the girls were not so much interested in art as they were in the boys. They were older than I. And why am I telling you all this?
We were,
Yes, yes, so it was the WPA period. And I called Harry Hopkins, who was not the head of the WPA art program, and told him about this group and what we were, and would they send us a teacher, because they were hiring artists as teachers. And I was able to get a teacher to come down. And at this time also, I was offered this scholarship.
To Pratt?
So how old were
To
you
Pratt.
at this point in your life?
I was 16.
16.
Yeah. So that what happened was that when it became known that we had this art club, there was one young lad in the club who was a good friend of mine, Glazer, and he invited an older friend of his to come down, and his name was Jack Katz. May he rest in hell in eternity. Really, what this man did. And what he had been sent down was to organize us to become communists. He was an organizer of the Communist Party.
Who sent him?
Who sent him was one of my friends in the group, whose name was Glazer, who had become a communist as a young person. And when I said, you know, that I got this scholarship to Pratt, he said, you can't go there. I said, why not? I had already gotten it. He said, they don't accept blacks. So I called the man from Pratt and I said, I'm sorry, I can't come to Pratt. He said, why not? I said, well, you don't accept blacks.
You were very impressionable.
Not only that, but I thought to myself, if they don't accept blacks, they don't accept Jews.
Mm-hmm.
And he may not have known I was Jewish. Now, had I gone to Pratt, you know, when Yogi Berra says, when you come to a fork in the road, take it, there are many reasons for your taking it. And this has happened to me so many times where some circumstance has led me away from something, just as when I got to Art Students League. And the teacher, Robert Brackman, I did such beautiful work that I could have been signed his name to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a very quick study. But I did one still life that is still in my house with my father's mandolin in it. I had brought that down and helped the mother to set up the still life. And when Robert Brackman learned that I was going home to eat because I couldn't afford to eat out, that the 10 cents car fare back and forth, that I was going from work there, and he gave me a scholarship. And the painting that is still in my classroom, this still life, when the National Museum opened in Washington, it wasn't called the National Museum then, I forget. but they had an exhibition where of each of the big schools, like the Art Students League, the 10 best works were on exhibit. My still life was one of them, you know.
And so you were in the Art Students League from how old to how old?
Very little. I was there from 16, well, when I quit, I was 17.
And where did, so you quit to go to,
Work.
Well, it was during, I was already working.
You
I
finished
worked-
high school before you got the scholarship to Pratt then, because you finished high school at age 15.
I was not yet 16. I had gone, I made,
We're just trying to get the chronology straight.
if you think, look how far back I remember, pretty
yeah, it's
Very
great.
good.
But let me tell you, besides the chronology, the exact chronology, I was just going to follow up something.
You left Art Students League to go to the 92nd Street.
Yes, what happened was that the WPA program allowed you to go to places without paying tuition because they were paying the tuition, the students. And after seeing that I could paint like Brackman, I by that time had already, I was working and had enough money to buy inexpensive. I was working down on Lower Broadway. I was working on right near, the store is still there, that you get secondhand books.
Strand Bookstore?
Yeah, and you could pick up things, secondhand books, very, very cheaply. And I had already collected not only secondhand books and art with illustrations of Rembrandt, and I was doing hatching, cross-hatching. I was learning more from going to museums and doing that than from any teacher. And I thought that I had been, this is what I had said, I'm going to quit painting for a while. And I had always been interested in the theater. And at the 92nd Street Y, they were giving a theater arts program. And I went. It was accidentally that I knew that because I had gone there to see whether they had art classes. I became an eternal dropout. I was going to every free art class, and I would stay there a day or two, or I didn't like what I was seeing, and I'd quit and go elsewhere. And I had gone up to the 92nd Street Y for art classes, and saw that there was an exhibition of maquettes of the small stage settings, and that there was a theater arts group. So I thought, I'm going to quit this for a while. I've painted all my life, and I love theater. And so I went up and went into this big room, and everybody looked at me, and they were all in their 30s, they were all older people, and there was cloth everywhere, and there was hammering. And I asked to talk to the teacher, and Moy Solitarov.
Oh, that's where I thought you, that's right.
Moy Solitarov came. Isn't that enough to go on for this time? You want me to go further
No,
or
keep
back
going, yeah.
further?
If you have a little more energy, let's
You have
do,
another 5 minutes on the tape, so.
What you didn't talk about yet,
My work experience.
how did you get, what made you decide to go to business school, become a secretary?
Well, my parents had no money, and I needed to, first of all, I was not 16 yet, okay, when I graduated. And I don't know how I heard of it, but it was the last time that this school existed where when you graduated from high school, you could go for half a year to the Corliers School of Business. And in that half year, you learned, and I'm very quick, speed typewriting, speed stenography, bookkeeping, office language, business usage, the works. And I learned it all, and I was excellent, excellent. And so I started going out looking for work when I graduated from there. It was June.
So you were 16?
I was not quite 16. And I went to employment agencies, and they wouldn't send me anywhere. And then I realized that, first of all, I wasn't dressed properly, because all that my parents could afford was for me to go to Blake Avenue, and I had 2 garments, one to wash and the other to wear. And they were very ugly, cotton, one was even worn, and I wasn't dressed properly, and it was summertime, and at the agency, they all had little white hats, and they had gloves, and all that, and so I told my parents they had to beg, borrow, steal, that I had to be dressed properly,
That's,
and so I got my little white hat and so forth, and I still am not sent out. And I realized that I would have to lie about my age, but not only that, I got to know the shuffle that would take place in these employment agencies, and I got to talking to some of the women. And there was one woman sitting next to me who had a newspaper I had never seen, and it was the Law Journal. And I asked her, what is it? And she said, it's the Law Journal there, and you can put in an ad, or you can answer an ad. And she let me look at it, and I saw at that time, because of the Depression, that lawyers out of the school couldn't afford an office, and so a whole bunch of them would get together and rent an office and pay a girl $5 or $6 to be the group telephone answerer and mail receiver, and that their clients would have an office with a secretary and all that. And so I decided that I would advertise in the Law Journal. And we had no telephone, but everybody around the neighborhood knew me. And the man in the candy store where there was a telephone loved me. And when I would buy a Charlotte Russe, he would put more whipped cream on. And he had a son who was younger than me, he was in love with me. And so I asked this candy store man whether I could advertise the Law Journal, leave his telephone, and would his son come and get me. And that's what happened. And
So
That's
just,
amazing
just
story.
because this tape is about to be over, so
yeah.
you were working for lawyers during the day, and when would you go to the
At
96
night.
at night?
After going home.
Mm-hmm.
After going home, I spent my time on the subways where I learned how to knit, and I had an Italian neighbor who taught me how to crochet, and I read books, and I drew, and it was a long subway. I spent hours and hours a day on the subways. So everything worked to my advantage in helping me to understand the world, how it works, and I got better than the equivalent of a college education working for lawyers, especially Francis Xavier Hennessy and Timothy O'Connell. Have you got another minute there?
I don't know, it's flashing, but it says 3 minutes left.
Anyway, when I went, they sent the boy, then I went down to interview, and it was Timothy O'Connell and the Temple Court building, which still exists, who interviewed me. And I had never taken legal language before. And he gave me steno pay. I don't know what in hell he's saying at all. And then he gives me legal size paper that I had never seen before. And I'm translating. Whereas the party of the first part has hereunto, I didn't understand what in hell I was translating, but I was doing it fast. And I gave it to him. There wasn't a single paragraph. It was all that. And he laughed, and he said, well, you don't know how to paragraph. He said, but you'll learn. And he hired me for $8 a week.
Woohoo!
You know, that was money. Do you know I gave money home from that?
Amazing.
Collect. I had come into the room and saw all of this activity, and he sat down to talk to me. And what did I say last? You can't.
You had not yet told us how it was that he interviewed you.
Okay. All right. Now, it's perfectly all right then that we can proceed. Is the light okay?
Everything is fine, and you're on candid camera.
Right now?
Yes.
All right, now that I'm on candid camera, you can see what an alpha woman I am, and therefore, why everybody who knows me at times has great problems. Because I've had so many experiences from which I learned that even in being interviewed, I'm already directing the interviewers. And they're both smiling while I'm saying this. And so this is really honest. And my daughter is looking at a side, not straight at me, and I don't know what the hell she's thinking, which is the usual thing. Okay, laughter aside. Meeting Solitar was another one of those moments in life where accidents bring you into an entirely new direction, and where I have often felt, without being religious, that I have a guardian angel directing me. Because even when things happen later on that bring difficulties, inevitably, that just as listening to you right now, talking to Eliza, that everything has its difficulties. So you have to really, in the end, even though wonderful accidents happen, you still have to keep on making choices. And the more experiences you have had in the past, such as my long experience working for lawyers, which taught me really how our society operates in every way, the better your choices are in the long run, the healthier they are. So there was Solitar at the 92nd Street Y in this big room with all of this activity going on. And he's looking at me, but I'm looking at him. And I saw right away that where I might hesitate, which doesn't happen very often, that when he hesitates, he has a device, and that device was his pipe. And I had observed how people use the accoutrements of their personality before. So I was very curious how he was going to use his pipe. And so even before he started talking to me, and he's observing me, he's stuffing his pipe. And he's not smoking it, he's stuffing it, and then he sticks it in his mouth. And then he lights it, and all of this is giving him the time. And I saw that time and time again in the many years that I knew him, to gather his own thoughts together and to help him diagnose how is he going to proceed and talk and present himself. So that this amused me because I had always seen this with all the lawyers that I had worked for. And so he wanted to know, why are you interested in theater? And so I was 17, and I said, well, all my life, and I thought I had a considerable life, all my life that I have been interested in art and painting, and I've done all this, and I went to the Art Students League, and I quit Bracknell because I felt that I was never going to become the first female Rembrandt, following his techniques and the academy of his style, and that I had tried many places, and since I have always loved theater, and that I had gone to theater of all kinds, I thought that this would be something that I'm interested in. And so he was very interested, and he outlined that they were very active in the theater as a result of this workshop, because they were responsible for productions at the 92nd Street Y, which had a very active program, and so forth. And he told me to come back the next Thursday, and I could join. Well, I was thrilled, because it was the end of a journey. I think I had talked about it before. I was at the end of a journey where I had tried all kinds of programs very quickly and surmised quickly, and knew that they weren't for me. This is programs in art, and all the arts. Well, when I came back, he sat down again with the pipe, and he said these words that I still remember: to be an artist in the theater, you have to be an artist first. And I start all of my students off with painting. I'm listening, and he gave me an assignment that I was to do 4 paintings, and I don't remember now whether he gave me the subject, because I remember some of the subjects, but they were to be a limited palette. Now at age 85, I still start that way, to use one color plus black and white, and to see all the variables that I could get with that one color, black and white. Now, I had not been used to using one color, excepting when I was a little girl, and I finally had a red crayon pencil. That was the only color I had. But in painting, I had unlimited colors. So this was a challenge. And I don't remember whether he gave me the colors or whether I chose them, but I know that one of them was blue, and I think it was ultramarine blue, yes, because it was a warm blues against other Prussian blue or whatever. Yellow ochre, and then of course black and white. And I don't remember now, but that's enough to talk about. And when I started mixing those colors, it was a revelation to me in many respects. Because, for one thing, I never had thought about how many variations there was between white and black. So just mixing between white and black, I mean, there was already a full palette. You do painting just with that. But when I started mixing with the blue, that was really a revelation, because all the tints and shades of ultramarine blue was already another palette. And then when I started including black in it, first I started just with the black and the blue, and it did make a different color with the black and the blue. It wasn't quite the same as the black and the blue out of it. So from that, and being diligent, I mixed these endless variations of black and blue and white and blue, and black and white. And it was an amazing revelation to me on the potential of color, and that you didn't need a world of color to create a world. So that's how I started with Solitar.
Can you stop just for a second?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah, I didn't think of what we were going to continue to talk about. Okay.
Okay, so should we take time to change channels? Are you from Winnie's to home?
You have to do like so. Right. Are we changing channels?
Okay, we're changing channels. All right. And the question to you is,
Yes.
what was Solitaroff's real legacy to you? What did you take from that experience with him that you kept and that you remember and sort of reference in your own thinking if you ever think about him?
Well, that's a complicated question because he's in my life every day. First of all, every time that I go up to the bedroom or anywhere from the upstairs vestibule, I have the portrait I did of him when I signed myself M. Stangen. And the portrait was a really expressionistic portrait, which still today portrays my sensibility about this man who was probably one of the biggest influences in my life as a teacher and as a man, because he was a very macho man. And how I conceived of that portrait will really tell you about him. He was really an intellectual of the first order with an enormous experience going back to Paris, where he worked with Diaghilev and the Ballet Russe as an assistant to the main stage designer. And he had come from Russia, where he had already considerable. So he came with the kind of background and depth of experience, and that I never had had in any teacher anywhere. If you have a good teacher, then the teacher takes you down this journey of their own life, just as now coming from Winnie, because she is a born teacher. She took me to a journey that even went further back than Solitaroff. So I learned from him to be analytical, because if you said things, he would challenge you. You know, what do you mean? You had to go further. And also because the group of people that he had gathered around him were very, very diverse in age and in experience, and very often the husbands or wives became involved in the group. And starting with the early experiences in painting with the limited palette, which I think I talked about before, that I still use in my classes, especially with people who come for the first time, just to open up their sense of what color means and of the unlimited capacity to find new colors.
Now I'm going to stop you for a minute, okay?
Yes.
Because I want to go back just a moment, if it's all right with you. And
Yes,
anyone
but I'm
else
on a trend that
I know, but your trends go on.
I know, but I have to finish what I'm saying.
Okay, all right.
That even when I started working with computer-generated images many, many years later, those early experiments with color led me to use computers in a way they had never been used before, and for which I became known in terms of the endless permutations and differences of color. Now, what were you going to ask me?
Well, I guess I'm also curious about, Solitaroff not only taught you a lot about making art, but there was something about his personhood that was very important to you, too.
Well, I think that, as I talk about it, I express
Yeah, well,
his personhood, because what happened was that I was the only person in this whole group who had any experience in the world of law. And my even small experiences with that had given me a business acumen that nobody in the group had.
Mm-hmm.
And Solotaroff and Riva, his wife, who really became a very important person in my life, in many ways even more than he, who also had a very interesting background, and their daughter, who was, at the time I was 17, she was almost 7. And she became really, she loved me, and I became a member of their family. And in later years, I would eat with them, but also when we had other ideas of what we would like to do that were not in key with what the 92nd Street program was. We wanted to start a theater of our own, and we were interested in starting a puppet theater, and that came as a result of their meeting Jack and the realization that Jack and I were going to marry, and they wanted to give us a wedding ceremony, so they created puppets and put on a puppet show of Millie and Jack being married.
This was how you were how old?
20.
So and your dad objected to
Oh,
Solotaroff, didn't he?
absolutely, because I was spending weekends and time away, and he felt, my father called him and my mother too, a Rasputin. Now, Rasputin, you're shaving your head.
Oh, yeah.
That I had been hypnotized by this man who was dictating my life, and he had gone to visit Solotaroff, and he told Solotaroff that he should tell me to leave the group, that I had no talent, and that if Solotaroff wouldn't do that, he would kill him. You're shaking your head.
It's amazing.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
And what happened?
So I came home, and I would always come home very, very late because I would be traveling from New York way back to Brooklyn, and the family would be asleep. My father certainly, because he had to go to work in the morning. And I get home, and my father was up, and he was waiting for me. And so he greets me, and he told me that Solotaroff had told him that I had no talent and that he doesn't want me in the group anymore. And so I had no reason to disbelieve him. And
You had no reason to disbelieve your dad?
yeah, why? I never.
After how many years had you been with him?
With Solotaroff?
Yeah.
But I did not believe that I believed what my father was saying. Don't question me why, but I believed it.
That's okay. Yeah, you believed
Well, it's okay. I believed him.
Yeah, believed him.
And I told him to go to sleep, and I couldn't sleep. And I reviewed the whole thing in my mind, and I decided, I don't care what in hell Solotaroff or anybody else says, that I believe I'm an artist, and I'm going to stick with it no matter what.
Wasn't that an amazing moment in your life?
Oh, I've had many amazing
Oh,
moments.
I know, Millie.
You know,
We're
there's
talking
once
about
again
this-
the crossroads.
The crossroads.
Yes,
Exactly.
you come
exactly.
to it, and any crossroads you have to make a decision. Some of the decisions are wise, some of them are unwise, and nobody knows what the results of any decision is going to be. But
How true.
you know that this decision went way back.
Yeah.
So what was Solotaroff's response to Jack?
Well, first of all, what did Solotaroff say when you talked to him?
He told me my father had visited and that he was very upset. And I don't remember really, I cannot recall it like script, but it didn't change my going there. And my father
Didn't kill him.
he didn't kill me either.
Did you ask Solotaroff what he said?
I don't remember.
You don't remember?
I don't remember what ensued. But that was before Jack and I were married. You know, that was quite a while before that. though I don't remember. Jack came into my life when I was 18, almost 19. It was the end of summer, 1938. Yes, the end of summer, 1938. And I was 19, September 22nd. And I had met him that weekend because he was going to school and needed money. And so he worked at the camp, Camp Nitgedeiget, which means Camp Carefree, for which Having Wonderful Time was written. That's a whole other story. And
Wonderful town?
Having a Wonderful Time.
Sorry.
You don't know how many pictures that come
Yeah,
through my mind. I have to
wonderful.
unscramble the pictures.
Take your time.
I have no choice. So,
I like your story of meeting him.
of Jack, well, that goes later than where we are now. But that is a nice story because at that camp, that weekend, that was Camp Beacon, which is now part of DIA and this whole artist colony, which it was not then.
This is some years later you're talking about.
No. This was 1938. It wasn't that many years.
I thought it was Camp Nicodine.
Yeah, Camp Nitgedeiget,
Yeah,
which
not
means,
Camp
yes, but then it became Camp Beacon. There was a gorgeous sunset. This was overlooking the Hudson, and there was a dance for the American Legion Brigade veterans who were there. Some of them had been injured. There was a dance to raise money to help them.
These were the ones who went to Spain?
That's right,
Mhm.
yes. And so I had by then a whole group of friends, including one fellow that I was really in love with, and we were to all go to the dance together, and we were everybody was just amazed. It's like I'm looking out here, and you see this vast, beautiful sunset, just like a painting, you know. And we're all looking at the sunset, and I see on a rise, a rocky rise to my right, there's a man all by himself, completely engrossed in the sunset, and I'm looking at this handsome man, and I looked at those lips, and I said, that guy is a good kisser. I'm looking for a Kleenex. So I walked up these rocks, and he didn't even see me coming. And I said, hi, and he's all startled. And he looks at me. I said, hi, what's your name? He said, my name is Jack, and he looks at me. He says, what's yours? And he said, Millie, and we started talking, and he then said, are you going to the dance tonight? Are you going with somebody? I said, no. And I never went to the dance. And we found that we had so much in common, and he wanted to put me on the swings. They had swings, and he was swinging me. And then we went down to a little waterfall. We were all by ourselves. Everybody was at the dance. And there at the waterfall, there was a pond, and we didn't have sex. I was a virgin. I don't know if you realize I was a virgin.
You were
It
awfully
was
old
Jack,
to be
it
a
was
virgin.
Jack who deflowered me later, much later. And we had but we kissed, and he was a good kisser. He was a good kisser. But not the best kissers. I had known better kissers. But anyway, I really liked this guy. It was a brief weekend. And then we went our ways, but he wanted to see me. And we were going to go to, what is that place where the concerts took place then? Way out. I'll remember it another time, that people went to from everywhere. So, you see, that makes you want to kiss. It's a kissing story. So, I still love kissing. I love kissing.
So lovely.
And do you know one man still kisses me on the lips?
Ken?
Ray Mutter.
Ring.
Every time he sees me, he kisses me on the lips. My internist, who's 10 years younger and still handsome.
Really nice.
All these diversions will portray for my grandchildren the very peculiar grandmother they have, which is okay. It gives them permission to be who they are. God damn it, be yourselves.
With them, you do not have to worry.
No, I know. I don't. And I don't worry because they're fabulous. So,
So did Dad participate in the Solitaire stuff at all?
yes, that's much later. Much later. Because Jack and I saw each other, and we would meet in front of the 42nd Street Library, the right-hand lion when you're looking at the library, the left-hand paw, because he lived way in the Bronx, and I lived way in Brooklyn, plus 11 blocks walk, and he was so damn poor that we used to go Dutch treat to the Apollo Theater where we saw foreign films, and they were 25 cents each. And then we would go to the Automat where he would order something that cost 10 cents. It was all Dutch treat.
Now, was he still in City College?
No, he was by then going to the New York School of Social Work, but I don't know if he dropped out and was a investigator for the Department of Welfare. I can't put the two dates together. But eventually, I think he went back to the School of Social Work. And he got involved with another woman from whom he learned everything that was then beneficial to me. Because he had been a virgin. Imagine at his age still being a virgin. Nice European Jewish boy. In any event, I stopped seeing him altogether. And I was involved with other fellows. And had a crush on some, but nobody that I ever intended to marry. I still was firm and resolved that I would never, never marry a mere man, or a mere woman for that. Never have to have responsibility for somebody else, and certainly never have children, because then how could I be an artist, say? I am still an artist, and how I did all that, but I never dreamt that other things would occupy so much of my time. Okay, so going back to Solitarov, they made this puppet show for our wedding.
Which was when?
Our wedding was in 1941, and we were going to be married much earlier, but my folks were still Orthodox, even though, not the way they used to be. And Jack was much kinder to my parents than I. When we decided to get married, it was as a result of having seen each other again quite frequently, because in May of that year, it was a beautiful spring. I was lying on the floor of the house I shared with my parents, the living room floor on the carpet, with my belly to the floor, reading a book. That was the way I used to like to read. And suddenly, I hear a phrase out of T.S. Eliot's Wasteland, like, here I am, a man in dry month, something, waiting for rain. And I suddenly said to myself, it's springtime and I'm not in love. How can that be? And then suddenly I say to myself, whatever happened to that nice guy, Jack? So, what did I do? Like I do now, extemporaneously. I got out a piece of paper and wrote him a letter. And I said, here I am in the spring and I'm lying on the floor reading a book and writing this letter because I'm suddenly thinking of you and wondering whatever happened. And I get a letter back. Well, I have to go back further. After that first concert at Lewiston Stadium, that's where it was, I get a letter from Jack that was so ardent, so in love with me, and I just recently found that letter,
Wow.
that it scared me.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I'm not ready for this kind of relationship. And so we saw each other, but I didn't encourage him to think that I was the woman for him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was 5 years older than me, and so potentially, you know, for him, it was a good time. But so that I always had that kind of wisdom. I didn't want to exploit anybody. I didn't want to hurt anybody. And so, in the meantime, life went on. And in the Solitaris group, to jump back, you know, to when Jack and I realized that we had become from May until June, that it was more than a friendship. And he no longer could stand having me go on the train to New Lots Avenue and then walk 11 blocks. He became frightened for me alone on the train. And he should have been, because I would be sometimes almost the last passenger on the train. And I would always go to the front of the train, which is near the exit, and I see men masturbating. And, you know, you see things. I was never afraid, but he had more knowledge and insight that it was really dangerous. And so he would take me home and then go back to the Bronx. And his mother wanted to know, war ja Girl from Brooklyn, but she would say in Yiddish, was darfst du haben? A Mädel, was lebt da sehr langer weg, 6 in the morning coming home, you know? And indeed, we realized that we not only shared common values and beliefs, but one day we were walking past a store on Fifth Avenue. I think it was, I forget if it was Lord & Taylor's, some store that had a display of furniture. And suddenly we were talking about the fact, you know, this is the kind of furniture would be nice to live with. And we look at each other. And we thought we'd get married that June. However, we didn't talk about it for a while. We thought we'd go to City Hall and get married. But Jack said, look, you can't do this to your parents, because he had met my mother and father. He said, whatever your differences may be, they're the only mother and father you're ever going to have. And you don't want to do anything that you're going to regret one day. This was Jack. So he said, we're going to have to talk to them, because they're going to want to make a wedding, even if it's a little wedding. And so by the time we got to talking to them, for the time it would have taken them to make a wedding, it was a Jewish holiday where you're not allowed to get married. And so to have a real Jewish wedding with a rabbi, an Orthodox rabbi, and all the rest, we had to wait until October 18th. And this is why we got married in October. Now, to go back, as a result, by that time, Jack was known, because we would meet after work, after I worked. We were still meeting at night. We would meet, Jack and I, at Central Park, And he used to come over to the group to see what we were doing. By that time, I had persuaded the group that we should leave the 92nd Street Y. And there were enough members in the group that if we each contributed a certain amount of money, we could pay Solitarov the same salary he was getting from the WPA. I think it was $45 a week. And so Solitarov thought it was a good idea too, and that we would meet at his house. And he had one of those railroad apartments on the west side, 90-something street. I think it was 93rd. And so that's what happened. The whole group moved there. And because of the puppet show, and Solitarov had been an artist in the theater, and it was by that time Hitler and all the rest, we eventually decided that we would create a puppet theater. And so by this time I was living with Jack, a married couple, in his mother's house, and she had given us the living room. No, she had given us her bedroom.
This is the apartment that we used to go to?
Yeah. She had given us her bedroom, and she had had a bedroom for herself, which she had rented to a boarder, and I was working. And we said we'd pay the rent, and that she would use the bedroom, and we would have the living room, which room was it?
There's 2 bedrooms.
Yeah, we would have the big bedroom, and my father made a bed for us, and and
Now, what was Dad doing at this time? Was he still in school?
Dad at that time,
Because didn't he go back to on the GI Bill?
oh, he got his degree before he went back.
This is 41 though, so it's already wartime. Pearl Harbor
Yeah,
was a
but he
year
hadn't
away.
been involved yet. He was
Yeah.
1A. He was supposed to be drafted, and we knew that when he got married, that we wanted to be married, and so the war effort was going on, and so as a result of the puppetry and all that, we decided to have the group a theater of social commentary. And so Alfred Kuzel, a younger lad in the group, a couple of years younger, who was madly in love with me, who was a wonderful, smart, talented boy, he and I were collaborating together to make the, what do you call it, when you have a trial proof of something?
Maquettes.
No, well, we met at Jack's mother's house, where I was living, at the window overlooking the park, and we created the first enormous puppet, first out of clay, and then paper mache over it, and that became the prototype. That was what it became, the prototype for our whole puppet group. And everybody agreed that this was a wonderful prototype. It was kind of a, I'm losing words now. Cubist. It was Cubist expressionist.
It's the puppets you have in the studio?
That's right, that has to. And what we did was create prototypes, which was called symbol number 1, symbol number 2, lovers, 2 lovers, a prototype for a professor, a prototype for a fascist, a prototype for a worker, and those still hang.
In those boxes.
But we also created prototypes for different kinds of crowd puppets, all with paper, huge, because they were rod puppets. So if we had a proscenium of 5 feet something, the puppets were above that. And the puppets, when I say rod puppets, they were not only these big heads, but there was a rod up the head with a hinge so that we could hinge the head going down this way and that way. And then there were these enormous rods that were flat rods, not round rods, that hit the floor. So we had, but the rods went under our arms. So if you can imagine, under the proscenium, the rods were there, and we were able to control the hands by rods by having them in our thumb and forefinger and this. So when I do this is how we control the rods, you see. So we could make the heads flutter, we could make things, and then when we had the rod under thing, we could make it move back and forth. And they had enormous sweep. But then in addition to that, we had prototypical crowns that would also be on a rod, and they would be on a level like this, a whole bunch of happy, of angry, and of every characteristic. And those puppets, unfortunately, when the group fell apart, the group did not fall apart. Solitarov had chronic bronchitis, and the doctor told him he could no longer live in this area. And so that the best thing for him would be to go to California. And he had no way to go. He didn't have the money. And I was the only person who had money. And so I gave him money. Ostensibly, he said he would borrow it, but I never expected that he would have the money to give me back. And I gave him the money to travel with his family to California, and members of the group went to California. And I was the one who didn't go. Okay? So...
Now this, you...
And you were the one who didn't go.
Yes.
And you were saying something when you say that. Can you go? Just
Well,
say
yes,
a little more about that? That's it.
Yes, because I had committed myself to Jack, and I didn't want to go to California.
Now you got married in September of 41,
Right,
and Pearl Harbor was December of 41?
right,
So all of this happened during that period of time?
right.
And how soon after was Dad?
Oh, not for a while, because he had a number,
Yeah.
He had a number, and his younger brother was already in England.
Mm-hmm. Morris.
That's right.
And Eddie?
Eddie had been married,
Uh-huh.
and he had a child, and so he was not at that point eligible.
Mm-hmm.
So, where were we?
Well, no, this is...
Solitarov and the group broke up, so they went to California.
They went to California, and we all became, well, before he went to California, we gave puppet plays to raise funds for war bonds. And we had auction of works, which we contributed, and we were very committed, to social. We were socially committed people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, were you still working with lawyers?
Yeah.
And then when did Dad get drafted?
Oh, he didn't get drafted until 1943.
Oh.
He didn't get drafted. That's a very important story.
Right.
I still was involved with the group and things like that, and I would come home quite late, very late. And Jack would already be in bed, and his mother at first didn't know what in the hell kind of marriage this was, especially since the first week we were there, she found, Jack had told me, Millie, I have no more socks. I said, why? What happened to your socks? He said, they're all dirty. I said, you expect me to wash your socks? I said, okay, if you'll wash mine, I'll wash yours. He didn't say another word, and his mother found him for the first time in the bathroom sink doing his laundry. So you could imagine this Jewish mother. However, she had known about Solitarov because there was a radical Yiddish theater called the Artef, and he and Benno Schneider had organized it, and he was the stage designer for the Artef. And it was a communist Jewish theater of social commentary, and when when the whole thing started with Stalin and what he was doing, and also the collaboration between, Russia and Germany and all that, he left. He not only left, but he was
He who?
Solitarov. Solitarov quit any kind of association with communism, because the whole idea of dictatorship of the proletariat wasn't the proletariat anymore, it was Stalin.
Right.
And so we had also a division in the group, because there were people in the group who were Stalinists. And so not only did part of the group go to California, but part of the group disintegrated back and forth.
I didn't realize that you and Dad were married for 2 years while you were still involved with Solitarov. I thought it was a shorter...
No, well, Solitarov had already left, and
Oh.
I was, this was, even after Solitarov left, Jack was not in war yet.
Yeah.
But as I still was involved somehow that I would come back late, because one night I came back and Jack was still up, so I got into bed, and you're going to have to forgive me if my dates are jumbled
No, it's
here.
great,
This
Mom.
is not an accurate history. But on the night table, next to the bed, there was a Phi Beta Kappa newspaper, and Jack had graduated 1939 from City College as Phi Beta Kappa. And so I was looking at this newsletter, and it had an article requesting people who had been in Phi Beta Kappa to apply to a language program where they needed people who could learn Japanese as quickly as possible, because the Japanese were interned and they didn't have Japanese translators, and it was important that they be able to hear things and to read things and so forth. And so when Jack came to bed, I said, Jack, look at this article. And he read it. He said, it's too late. They already were here in New York a week ago. So I said, I'm sure that they're interviewing other places. Look further. He said, well, it was, I think, in a day or two, they were going to be interviewing people to Washington. I said, Jack, go to Washington. I said, imagine in this war, if instead of being sent right away to the front lines here or there, that you have a year and almost a year and a half, and to study Japanese, and you already know so many languages. It's natural. So Jack went to Washington, and when he went to Washington, he told the man at the desk where he was going, and he told them where to go in, and Jack went in, and all of his qualifications were fine, and then the doctor examined him, and he said, you can't go, you have a heart murmur. Did you know that?
No, I wonder if he has the same mitral valve prolapse that I do.
Well, look, you see how important everything is?
Sure.
He had a heart murmur.
Mm-hmm.
And so Jack was kind of crestfallen, and he accepted it, and he's walking out, and the man who had directed him said, wait a minute, aren't you one of those Japanese Beatles? He said, yes. He said, but they discovered I have a heart murmur. And he writes a note, and he says, you go back and say that you're accepted, tell them that you're accepted into the program. So he was accepted into the program. And I was not going to be a camp follower. I go to Boulder, Colorado? Never, never. So there was some kind of orientation in New York, and then I went on the train with him, on the subway to, I forget where, to say goodbye, and went home. And he said that, he'd get in touch with me, and we would write to each other, and so forth. And
What were you looking for at the time?
I'm trying to remember, and I don't remember. Anyway, a week or so passes, and I'm depressed. And I'm never depressed. I said, what's wrong with me? I'm depressed. I said, for God's sake, you're missing Jack. Of course you're missing Jack. Why did you marry him to begin with? Because you love him. You need him. And I sent a telegram to Jack, find a place, I'm coming. by that time, the few couples that were married had found the only existing places in Boulder, Colorado. And the only place that Jack could find was a store that was midway between the College on the Hill, University of Colorado, the typical college on the hill with its own culture, and the village. And midway there was a shopping thing, and there was a store. And somebody had made this store into an apartment. So how? Because the big window of the store had a shade. And there was a toilet. And there was a little passage between the big thing and the toilet. And in this passage, there was a 2-burner stove. So that was the apartment. We had no car. And so we walked. And we walked, and we walked, and we walked, because this was midway between the house, and down there. Oh, this was such an adventure. Now, going to Colorado, I had to take a train, and then I'm trying to remember, it was somehow, I don't remember whether I took the train at 9 and arrived at 5, I don't remember. But you had a stopover in Chicago. And while in Chicago, to wait for the train that would take me to Denver, then I would take a train to Boulder, I had enough time to go to the Chicago Museum. So I went to the Chicago Museum, and I couldn't take any paintings with me to hang on the wall. And I bought a lot of picture postcards, and I thought I'd put those on the wall until I could paint some paintings to put on the wall. So I came to Chicago I came to Boulder, and I think that we sent a trunk over with things, and we lived in that store. I think, you want to hear more?
Well, we have about maybe 5 more minutes, so
All right,
why don't we
so
just finish it?
I could go backwards, I could go
No,
forwards.
keep going forwards. This is great. So you're
Yeah.
in Boulder.
Well,
I thought you moved then in Boulder. Didn't you live on a...
oh yes,
Yeah.
oh yes. So in Boulder, I really created, I went and I shopped, and I created a real house in that one room, and it was lovely, but I felt that we would be much better off if we were near the campus. And so I went up there looking for space, and I found that I could rent an apartment in one of the houses not far from the university, but on the very last row of houses that looked out on the Flatirons, which were the foothills, of the Rockies. But they were more than hills. They called them flat irons because, as you would see, the irons, when they're hot this way, they were like that. A lot of flat irons, and when the sun was setting, it would make them red, so they looked like burning irons. And behind that, there was the canyon. I mean, it was the whole canyon that I investigated more than any other Boulder wife, certainly, because I learned to ride horseback, and I used to ride in the canyons, So, this little apartment that we found was over a one-car garage, and it was built by the father of a teenage daughter, who by this time was no longer at home, as a little separate dwelling. And so it had one room, which was really a small room, but not so small. It had an upright piano in it, and it had a table in it, and I thought, boy, this would be a great space for a studio. And as a sleeping arrangement. The man had created a very narrow porch, which was just wide enough for 2 twin beds. And the twin beds were from the wall going toward the house and this porch. And he had windows that were screens that went down, and in the winter you could pick up. Yeah, and it was just tiny, you know. And we got used to sleeping in one twin bed.
And when did you start teaching there?
Well, that's a long story. And so I became acquainted with the whole University of Colorado, not only campus, but with the goings-on. And I learned that one of the wives of another language or person, he was Michael Hodis. I have to see if I can find him. And his wife's name I don't remember, but I learned that there was a group at the University of Colorado called Orchesis, O-R-C-H-E-S-I-S, and that it had 1,000 students who, if they wished, instead of physical training, or what do you call it, physical?
Ed.
Instead of phys ed, they could take this course, and the person leading it was Marjorie Wentworth, who was part of the original group of Martha Graham. And so she was teaching them Martha Graham techniques, and Mrs. Hodis was the accompanist. So I asked the Hodis woman, to ask Marjorie Wentworth whether she would mind if I came there and sketched, because I thought I could do figures in action and all that. And Marjorie Wentworth was delighted. And so I came and I got very well acquainted with Marjorie Wentworth. And I learned that this big university, that the biggest event of the year was the annual Orchesis recital, for which they would invent dances and have an enormous stage, enormous, 20 feet high, I think it was 40 feet long, enormous stage with full lighting equipment and everything. And by this time I had learned all about theater arts. So I thought, my God, the theme for that year, because it was wartime, was the 4 freedoms. And they had one theme that was the freedom of religion. And so Marjorie Wentworth said she knows all the moves for the Christian religion, but she doesn't know the moves for the Hebrews. And she knew I was Jewish. So would I help her in the choreography for this? So of course. So, and not only that, I said, how about if I do your staging? He said, we don't have the money for it. We have a $25 budget. I said, $25, I could do it. So, because I immediately thought, you don't need really staging, all I needed was backdrops. And so, for $25, I went to the lumber yard, and I told them what I was doing for it. I wanted a special price, and I bought rolls and rolls of the roofing paper, you know, that pink paper, 4 feet wide, and I rolled them out on the floor of the auditorium and pasted them together with that brown tape, you know, and I painted these backdrops for it, and designed the lighting and everything. And it was the most extraordinary concert that they ever gave, and it was written up in the papers. Somewhere I have newspaper articles that describe my exhibition there and things like that.
You were having fun.
Oh, fun! Everything that I had ever learned everywhere came together, and also my love of theater and my love of dance, and because I used to go to, it used to be a theater called the Davenport Theater, where as teenagers you could go and not pay any money, and Davenport was an old hack who would come on with a black cape and to introduce the theater. And he had people there from all over the country who wanted to come to the New York area, so that people down below, this was a very small theater, would pay 25 cents. But if you sat up in the balcony, they passed a hat, you know. So I knew all kinds of theater, the theater my father had taken me to, and that the Abby Stark's family had taken me to. And, you know, I really already had a lot of accumulated